Lagrella the Magpie. Green, white, and blue for an uncommon 2/3 legendary human soldier with a long line of text. When Lagrella enters, exile any number of other target creatures controlled by different players until Lagrella leaves the battlefield. When an exiled card enters under your control this way, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. This little unassuming commander from the streets of New Capenna was what I set my sights on when I gave myself a challenge. Build an Artisan commander deck. See, I had encountered something once when digging through my collection. There were several uncommon rarity cards in Magic that were really cool, but I had no place to put them. All of my commander decks were full of cards I felt were stronger than them at higher rarity. And it makes sense, of course cards at rare or mythic are going to generally be more powerful than commons at uncommons. As a quick explanation, Artisan is a lot like Pauper, but instead of restricting yourself to exclusively commons, Artisan has you use commons and uncommons alike, just no rares or mythics. That's when I took a closer look at Lagrella and began putting together an Artisan Bant Blink deck. A lot of people in building Bant Blink will look towards Rune of the Hidden Realms. Many of the cards that would go into that deck sit at higher rarities, like Displacer Kitten, Thassa Deep Dwelling, or Teleportation Circle. The payoffs likewise are also up in rarity. Titans, merfolk that draw cards, or large-scale token makers. However, I didn't want to make just another Bant Blink deck of that kind. I wanted to pose a restriction on myself. Hence, Artisan. Many people go straight to Pauper when they want a challenge, and I did have a fun Pauper Orzhov Aristocrat strategy at one point. But there are a great deal of sleeping bombs waiting to be discovered in the uncommon line, and Artisan really opens up the possibilities wider than can sometimes be expected. I do not currently have my Lagrella deck together anymore. It was one of many that fell when I purged a large number of my commander decks, bringing me from over 30 down to a little under 20. However, it was still a potent and fun deck to play, full of interactivity and value, which could even stand against some of the superpowered decks my pod will sometimes play. My name is Samson Loreseeker, and I'd like to invite you to sit back, brush off the silver, and let me regale you with the story of the Magpie and what it brought to me. Upon reading Lagrella's text, one immediately clues in that this is a deck that wants to enter the battlefield effects. But without access to the rare binder, we need to look elsewhere for payoffs, and when one starts to dig through the commons and uncommons, one can find a great deal of value hiding just below the surface. My rendition of the deck ended up as a control shell, but there are a great number of ways to build her. Perhaps you run several energy-producing cards. Maybe you run some mill pieces that target yourself or enemies. Maybe you completely stock up on creatures that draw more cards, or creatures that produce various tokens. And who could forget the ever-popular Soul Sisters strategy? But as I said, my Lagrella deck ended up more akin to a control shell, with a slight political lean. Fiend Hunter, Mana War, Acidic Slime, Reclamation Sage, these creatures all come down and remove something from play, from an irritating creature to a problematic enchantment or artifact. Several modal creatures too fit that role, Cleanup Crew being an absolute powerhouse of versatility. There were other creatures with very interesting effects, such as Portal Manipulator, who slid under the radar in the Clue product. Portal Manipulator in particular can dominate a board where combat reigns, and being able to flicker them at will to always ensure that you are not being attacked and your opponents are is a very strong ability. And Lagrella is no different, able to not only hit your opponent's creatures but your own. She can end up being her own protection, as your opponents have to consider if getting rid of her to get their vital creature back is worth having the other opponent's creatures also return. And if you happen to tuck your own Mana War or Fiend Hunter under her, there's no guarantee for them that they will have their creature back if Lagrella gets destroyed. As fitting for a member of a mafia full of lawyers, Lagrella turns the game into a very political one. And even if you are not rebuying your own removal, getting to rebuy your Wood Elves or Quandrix Cultivators to ramp even further off of the death of your commander will help ensure that you always have the mana available to recast her on a later turn. The amount of value packed into this deck without even touching any of the usual rare suspects genuinely surprised me the first few times I played it. Another pleasant surprise with the deck was how interactive it became when I stopped trying to cram every synergistic piece in. Though they aren't rare, I still made sure not to put Path or Swords into the deck, as they felt too obvious and easy. Plus, many of my creatures more than made up for it, as well as having widespread removal in the command zone. As a result of this, my instants and sorceries ended up being a bit more protective than aggressive. and this taught me a very important lesson. Blink and flicker spells function the same as cards like Dive Down or Snakeskin Veil. With the creature no longer there to be targeted, the removal fails. Not to mention that it would rebuy an enter the battlefield effect, making it even better than merely giving the creature hexproof. Using such spells on Lagrella ended up being a huge boon too, as I could target her with the spell even if she wasn't the one being removed. Then, she would trade out the creatures she took, leaving mine larger than before. This also destroyed usual combat mathematics, as suddenly my attacker would be down a creature, and I would have a blocker that would do something on re-entry and then block even bigger than before. I kinda glossed over it, but those two +1/+1 counters she puts on your creatures when they re-enter? Yeah, that sometimes could be a much bigger deal than you expect. Take a card like Mistraven, for instance. The first time it hits the battlefield, it's merely a flying 2/2 that bounces an opponent's creature. Not bad. But coming back from under Lagrella, suddenly it is a 4/4 flyer, and that makes a massive difference, especially if it's in mid-combat. Say someone attacks you with 3/3/3 golems, and all you have is Lagrella with a Mistraven underneath. All it takes is one Cloud Shift effect, and suddenly they are attacking you with a single 3/3, and you have a 4/4 flying blocker. It's easy to see magical Christmas land opportunities of perfect mana leading to drawing a dozen cards and winning the game, but I much prefer seeing much more realistic lines. An important note, though, is that should you do this type of deck, make sure you have some removal spells that are not creature-based, in the face of cards like Hushbringer, or, more likely, Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. There are also very many counterspells at Uncommon that are perfectly acceptable and functional. Everyone is always so focused on the regular counterspell, or Arcane Denial, or Offer You Can't Refuse, that they disregard anything that costs 3 mana. While, yes, it is a bit harder to keep up 3 mana, many of the cards at that cost point will even have a benefit for you, like Disappearing Act. But that is a subject for another time. The point remains, this deck was incredibly interactive, and resulted in a lot more table talk that had more players paying full attention to the game, as the board could change at any moment. The third major thing I encountered when building this deck was the consistency. Many rare cards, especially the build-arounds and the commanders, are usually quite unique. There aren't always going to be more cards that do exactly what that thing does. In terms of commanders, that is usually why the commander is chosen. It is why cards like the Boots and Greaves are run so often. People will need that protection for their commander if they want their deck to, quote, do the thing. If the card isn't the commander and is just some piece in the deck that is absolutely vital, their whole plan crumbles the instant that one thing is unable to function, and sometimes it never even shows up, leaving the person to play a bunch of cards that aren't nearly as strong as they could be. But, when building an Artisan commander deck, that comes up a lot less often. Mechanically unique cards show up a lot less in these rarities, but more importantly, let's talk about signposts. Signpost uncommons are a term used to describe a cycle of uncommon cards in a set that are made to tell you what to look for in Limited. If we take a look at Foundations, we see these cards. Empyrean Eagle, blue-white for a Flying Lord. Dreadwing Scavenger, blue-black for Threshold. Perforating Artist, red-black for Raid. Ruby, my girl, red-green for Power 4 or greater. Good Fortune Unicorn, green-white for counters. Fiendish Panda, black-white for life gain. Balmor, Battle Mage Captain, red-blue for spell slinging. Wardens of the Cycle, green-black for morbid. Heroic Reinforcements, red-white for tokens. And finally, Tatyova with blue-green for landfall. These 10 cards are multicolored uncommons that inform you what each color pair is looking to do in a draft or sealed deck. And you will notice that none of these are very unique things to care about. As a result, there are a great many creatures that do similar things to these creatures, or, at the very least, fit into the same archetype. This makes it incredibly easy to find more cards to do the same thing, meaning you rely less heavily on each individual card to pull its weight. In a counters deck, it doesn't matter if you have Good Fortune Unicorn or Renata Called to the Hunt. In a singleton format, that repetition of cards can make for a more consistent deck that can, quote, do the thing. Now, I of course must be perfectly honest, not everything is going to be hunky-dory in an Artisan deck. The simple truth of the matter is that rare cards are rare for a reason, and if you do end up building an Artisan deck and running it in a pod with people who haven't done the same, you will inevitably run into some power problems. First up, lands. You will be playing tap lands if you want multicolored lands, but that is not the end of the world. There are so many spells that can find non-rare lands and put them into play, like Circuitous Route finding gates. But it will definitely not be quite as speedy out of the gates as some of the bigger rare stuffed decks will be. And please, please, please don't underestimate the power of running exclusively basic lands. Secondly, board wipes. There are not a great many board wipes at Uncommon. Truthfully, there are only 2 actual factual board wipes at that level, Kirtar's Wrath and Extinguish All Hope. But if you're the only one playing an Artisan deck, that won't be as big an issue, since we all know everyone else will have at least one as well. But the last simple truth is that your opponent's creatures and cards will likely be a higher quality than yours. Their protection will be a bit better, their removal a bit stronger, etc. But that is all perfectly fine. You don't need to be the one making the biggest, splashiest plays. After all, the one who wins in Commander is the last person standing. And it may be a little sneaky and underhanded, but you could absolutely use players' biases to your advantage. Your deck is only uncommons, so for the most part your threats won't be as threatening as other people's, and you can politics your way around quite easily with that fact. You may not be running Hoof, but Overrun can still absolutely destroy a player with enough tokens. You may not Thoracle, but Labman doesn't care so long as you draw enough cards. Just don't count on the element of surprise every time. Just like any other commander deck, play it enough times and players will recognize the threat cards and kill them, the same as any other. This type of challenge will test your deck building skills. Being unable to run cards that give you everything you want plus a milkshake will require you to be a bit more thorough on covering all of your deck's bases. And the undeniable upside is this. Building like this is incredibly budget friendly. I was able to construct Lagrella entirely from my regular collection without needing to buy any new cards at all. And every set produces more and more cards that go into a deck like this. Being able to construct pretty competitive decks on a budget is always a pleasant bonus. The Magpie taught me many important lessons, but most importantly, I had fun while playing that deck. It was a ton of fun, and it led to so many games that had a lot more interaction than some of my games in the past. My Lagrella deck may not still be put together, but her spirit absolutely lives on, and I have more Artisan decks in the works. If you are looking for something new to brew to change things up a bit, give Artisan a try. Who knows, the Magpie may teach you something you didn't expect too. Thank you so much for watching. I've been really enjoying working on these videos for all of you, and have several ideas for other videos bouncing around in my noggin. If you enjoyed the video, please do the usual YouTube mumbo jumbo. Like the video, subscribe, ring the ding, and tell me your favorite uncommon card in the comments below. And until next time, take care of yourselves.